Prayer by the chaplain.
Let us pray for this house, the world, and all those who are in need. Gracious Lord, we pray this day for the government of the great state of Minnesota. Extend your hand of guidance to our governor, our senators, our representatives, and our judges. Help them to serve with hearts filled with justice, humility, patience, and compassion, so that life in our state may be well and safely ordered. God of peace, conflicts and disputes are among your people and the nations of the world. In places of turmoil and terror, bring a harvest of righteousness and reconciliation, sown in justice and peace. Guide the leaders of our government and all governments so that they may govern and serve with a vision of a peaceful world. God of healing, we lift before you today those who are suffering from illness of any kind and are in need of your presence in their lives. We pray for the lonely, the hungry, the abused, the neglected, the homeless, and all those who are suffering from mental and physical ailments, especially those we name before you now in this time of silence. Nurturing God, we pray for each representative, their staff, and all those who serve here in this house. Give them and their families patience, courage, and understanding through long hours of work and exhausting campaigns. Grant them wisdom in their labor and rest in their lives away from this place. Into your hands, O Lord, we commend all for whom we pray, trusting in your love and mercy. Amen.
The chaplain for today is the Reverend Ryan Brodeen from Abiding Savior Lutheran Church, Mounds View, Minnesota. Pledge of Allegiance. Please remain standing and recite the Pledge of Allegiance to the United States of America. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The clerk will take the roll. The clerk will close the roll. A quorum is present. The clerk will read the journal of the preceding day.
Journal of the House, 89th session, 33rd day, St. Paul, Minnesota, Wednesday, March 25th, 2015.
If there is no objection, further reading of the journal will be dispensed with, and the journal will be approved as corrected by the chief clerk. Hearing no objection, the journal is approved as corrected by the chief clerk. Comparison reports. There's a copy of this order of business on each member's desk. If there is no objection, the motions will prevail. Hearing no objection, the motions prevail and the substitutions will be made. Petitions and communications.
Communications from the Governor, and the letter is addressed to the Honorable Kurt Doudt, Speaker of the House. Dear Mr. Speaker, I respectfully request the opportunity to address a joint meeting of the session of the 89th Minnesota State Legislature on Thursday, April 9th, 2015 at 7 o'clock p.m. for the purposes of presenting my state of the state message. Thank you sincerely, Governor Mark Dayton. Pepin moves that an invitation be extended to the Governor to address a joint convention of the House of Representatives and the Senate to be held in the House chamber at 7 o'clock p.m. Thursday, April 9th, 2015. That the chief clerk be instructed to invite the Senate by message to meet in joint convention to convene at 6:45 p.m., that the Governor be advised accordingly, and that the Speaker appoint a committee of 5 members of the House to act with a similar committee to be appointed by the Senate to escort the Governor to the joint convention.
Reports of Representative Pepin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. This simply allows us to meet with the Senate when the Governor comes on Thursday, April 9th, 2015.
All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion prevails. Reports of standing committees and divisions. A copy of this order of business has been placed on each member's desk. If there is no objection, the reports will be adopted. Hearing no objections, the reports are adopted. Second reading of House files.
Second reading House File number 177.
Second reading.
Second reading House File number 236.
Second reading.
Second reading House File 291.
Second reading.
Second reading House File 439.
Second reading.
Second reading House File 607.
Second reading.
Second reading House File 654.
Second reading.
Second reading House File 805.
Second reading.
Second reading House File 840.
Second reading.
Second reading House File 980.
Second reading.
Second reading House File 1257.
Second reading.
Second reading House File 1268.
Second reading.
Second reading House File 1314.
Second reading.
Second reading House File 1427.
Second reading.
Second reading House File 1555.
Second reading.
Second reading House File 1606.
Second reading.
Second
Mr.
reading
Speaker?
Second reading House File
For what
1625.
purpose does the gentleman rise?
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to move that we move to motions and resolutions. And I'd like a roll call. Well, we don't need a roll call. A roll call. We should get a roll call, please.
Roll call having been requested, seeing 15 hands, there will be roll call. The gentleman from Hennepin, Representative Leader Thiessen, can you please restate your motion?
I move that we adjust the order of business and move revert to motions and resolutions.
The motion is to advance to motions and resolutions. Discussion? Leader Pepin?
I would ask members to vote against that motion.
Further discussion? Clerk will take the roll. The clerk will close the roll. There being 59 ayes and 70 nays, the motion does not prevail. We will now continue with second readings.
Second reading, House File 1625.
Second reading.
Second reading, House File 1658.
Second reading.
Second reading, House File 1770.
Second reading.
Second reading, House File 1884.
Second reading.
Second reading, House File 1974.
Second reading.
Second reading, House File 2118.
Second reading. Second reading of Senate files.
Second reading, Senate File number 1563.
Second reading. Introduction of bills. Excuse me.
Go ahead.
The following House files have been offered for introduction today. The Chief Clerk will report the House files and give them their first reading.
Introduction and first reading of House Files 2121 through 2139.
First reading House files 2121 through 2139. Messages from the Senate.
Message from the Senate. Mr. Speaker, I hereby announce the passes by the Senate of the following Senate file herewith transmitted. Senate File 619, an act relating to data practices, and it's signed Joanne M. Zoff, Secretary of the Senate.
First reading of Senate files.
First reading, Senate File number 619, an act relating to data practices. Zerwas moved that Senate File number 619 and House File number 654, now on the General Register, be referred to the Chief Clerk for comparison.
Hearing no objection, so ordered. Motions and resolutions. There are copies of the non-controversial motions at the House desk and online. If there is no objection, we will take action on these motions first. Hearing no objection, the motions prevail.
Baker moved that House File number 614 be recalled from the Committee on Job Growth and Energy Affordability Policy and Finance and be re-referred to the Committee on Health and Human Services Finance.
The gentleman from Candy, Ojai, Representative Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. I have spoke with Chair Dean and HHS Finance. They'd like to hear all the long-term care workforce bills together. So after the hearing in HHS Finance, the bill will be sent back to the Committee on Job Growth and Energy Affordability.
Discussion? All in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion prevails.
Sanders moves that House File number 840, now on the General Register, be re-referred to the Committee on State Government Finance.
The gentleman from Anoka, Representative Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. This is the Elections Omnibus Bill. It was passed the General Register. State Government Finance would like to take a look at it, so request member support to move the bill there for an additional hearing.
Discussion.
Thank you.
All in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion prevails.
McNamara moves that House File number 846 be recalled from the Committee on Agriculture Finance and be re-referred to the Committee on Environment and Natural Resources Policy and Finance.
The gentleman from Dakota, Representative McNamara.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have talked to myself and Representative Hamilton and would like the bill moved. Thank you.
Discussion. The gentleman from Dakota, Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And would Representative McNamara yield for a question?
He will yield. The gentleman from Dakota.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative McNamara, could you describe what that bill is, or just so we have some idea of what it is?
The gentleman from Dakota, Representative McNamara. Chair McNamara.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and members and Representative Hansen. House File 846 is the governor's budget bill, and we're going to use that to build our base of our budget.
Further discussion? All in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion prevails.
Quam move that House File Number 1271 be recalled from the Committee on Job Growth and Energy Affordability Policy and Finance and be re-referred to the Committee on Health and Human Services Finance.
The gentleman from Olmsted, Representative Quam.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I've talked to, communicated with both chairs and the appropriate committee to hear this bill on group residential housing. Some changing of modifying provisions would be the HHS Finance Committee.
Discussion. All in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion prevails.
Torkelson move that House File Number 1781 be recalled from the Committee on Legacy Funding Finance and be re-referred to the Committee on Environment and Natural Resources Policy and Finance.
Chairman Torkelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a Clean Water Fund bill. Normally in the past has started in environment. We want to do that again this year. I've talked to both chairs and they're fine with the motion.
Discussion. The lady from Hennepin, Representative Kahn.
Yes. Mr. Speaker and Representative Torkelson, is it assumed then that the bill, after being in Environment and Natural Resources Policy and Finance, will then be returned to the Legacy Committee?
Is the lady from Hennepin asking the gentleman to yield?
Yield, yes.
He will yield. The gentleman, Chair Torkelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, Representative Kahn, that is the intention, that it would move from environment back to legacy.
Thank you.
The lady from Hennepin. Any other discussion? All in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion prevails.
Metsa move that House File Number 1905 be recalled from the Committee on Public Safety and Crime Prevention Policy and Finance and be re-referred to the Committee on Agricultural Finance.
The gentleman from St. Louis, Representative Metsa.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I've talked with both Chair Hamilton and Chair Cornish. The basics in this bill doesn't affect the policy or finance in Chair Cornish's committee, and we've all agreed that it should move to Agricultural Finance, the committee that has jurisdiction.
Discussion. All in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion prevails.
Show and move that House File Number 1988 be recalled from the Committee on Health and Human Services Reform and be re-referred to the Committee on State Government Finance.
Representative Schoen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. This bill is about grants related to diabetes prevention programming for AMPERS and TPT. It belongs in state government with Chair Anderson and Chair Mack is informed and understanding as well. I appreciate your support.
Discussion. All in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion prevails.
Christensen moved that House File Number 2047 be recalled from the Committee on Education, Innovation Policy and be re-referred to the Committee on Education Finance.
The gentleman from Dakota, Representative Christensen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I've talked to both chairs of the Education Policy and Education Finance, and they agree that this bill for a small appropriation for information technology partnership in schools belongs in finance.
Discussion. All in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion prevails.
Halverson moved that House File Number 607, now on the General Register, be re-referred to the Committee on Commerce and Regulatory Reform.
The lady from Dakota, Representative Halverson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and that is my motion. We heard this bill last night in the Health and Human Services Finance Committee. It was re-referred to Ways and Means, and this bill needs to be heard in the Commerce Committee. As we heard in testimony last night from the author, the vague language of state-sponsored health programs is broad enough that it will likely sweep up CGIP, PEEP, and other employer-sponsored programs for the state, and so it makes it necessary to be heard in the Commerce Committee, and I'd like a roll call, please.
Roll call having been requested. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call discussion. The gentleman from Carver, Representative Hoppe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Halverson and members. Representative Halverson, I appreciate your thoroughness and willingness to have bills heard in multiple committees, but I don't think that we need to hear this bill this year in Commerce. So I appreciate your consideration, but I would urge members to vote no. Thank you.
Further discussion. The lady from Hennepin, Representative Loeffler.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. This is a bill that has to do with access to health care services, and it particularly for reproductive health services and abortion. And it does say that it would limit the ability to provide funding for state-sponsored health programs. And state-sponsored health programs, we believe, may include the State Employees Insurance Program. The Public Employees Insurance Program may impact our school district employees, our city employees, township employees who take advantage of that program. And because the author was not able to clearly say that that was excluded, we really felt the Commerce Committee should look at it, tighten up the language if that's not the intent, and then it can come back.
The lady from Hennepin, Representative Hortman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wonder if Representative Tice would yield.
Representative Tice will yield. The lady from Hennepin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Tice, I'm not on the Health and Human Services Reform Committee. I wonder if you could briefly describe your bill for the members so we can determine whether we think it should go to the Commerce Committee or not.
The lady from Stearns, Representative Tice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and Representative Hortman. What the bill does is it takes out the taxpayer funding public assisted abortions and health care.
The lady from Hennepin, Representative Hortman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Representative Tice. That's helpful.
Further discussion. The lady from Olmsted, Representative Liebling.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wonder if Representative Tice would yield again.
The lady from Stearns will yield. The lady from Olmsted, Representative Liebling.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Tice, the bill says funding for state-sponsored health programs. I wonder if you could tell the body where the definition is of state-sponsored health programs that this is referring to so that we can know exactly what state-sponsored health programs the bill is addressing.
The lady from Stearns, Representative Tice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and Representative Liebling. I do not have my paperwork here with me right now. I was not prepared to have it, so I don't have that answer at this time.
The representative from Olmsted, Representative Liebling.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, Mr. Speaker and members, Representative Tice couldn't answer the question in committee either. And that is exactly the problem and why this bill needs to go to the Commerce Committee so that that can be discussed, because nobody seems to know. Now, let's be really clear about what this bill is. This bill is telling women that they cannot have services paid for that they have now. So this bill is taking away funding from women who currently have funding to get an abortion should they decide that they need one. When you're taking funding and taking away something from somebody, it is incumbent on you to at least tell them who they are.
Take it away? No.
I think the women of Minnesota need to know if the bill that you are passing affects them. And we do not know that. And whatever your feelings are about the underlying issue, I think that if you're going to pass a bill that impacts women and says you don't get funding that you have now, the women need to know whether they are in the group that you are taking services away from. So that is what Representative Halverson's motion is about, moving this to Commerce, so at least that this can be discussed and there can be more definition and more clarity around who this is affecting. In other words, does it affect you? members who have state-sponsored health insurance as members of the House? Does it affect our staff who have state-sponsored health insurance? Does it affect other employees who have state-sponsored health insurance? This is what needs to be answered, so I would ask that you support the Halverson motion.
Any further discussion on the Halverson motion? The member from Dakota, Representative Halverson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, members, for considering this motion. This motion is about our processes, and this motion is about the way that we allow the public to fully understand the laws that we are passing. And I firmly believe if we cannot define in a committee exactly who our laws that we're passing are going to impact, we need to continue the committee process. Our committees are here so that we can make bills better, so we can do the work of the people of Minnesota and give the people of Minnesota an opportunity to hear, see, and testify on bills that are going to impact them. So I urge members to vote green. Thank you.
The member from Dakota, Representative Atkins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I apologize for speaking after the maker of the motion. It struck me, though, that I don't know if this bill is set to come to the floor anytime soon, but my request of the maker of the motion might be that it be withdrawn for today. The author indicated that she didn't have the answer on whether it would apply to programs like CGIP and PEEP. Perhaps the better time would be to make this motion immediately upon coming back and give her an opportunity to identify whether it applies or not. I suspect we can obviously do it today, but I'm guessing I might know what the outcome will be. Perhaps give her an opportunity to identify whether it applies, and then she may want to have, or Chairman Hoppe may want to bring it to the Commerce Committee as just a matter of good judgment.
The member from Dakota, Representative Halverson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Atkins, for your suggestion. I think it is a good one. Would Representative Atkins yield?
He will yield. Representative Halverson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Atkins, I completely understand your very thoughtful suggestion. Could you tell me, as a former Commerce Committee chair, how this is going to affect deadlines, because I believe that we've got a committee deadline this week, and I want to be sure that we are not going to lose an opportunity because of any kind of sense of urgency.
The member from Dakota, Representative Atkins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Halverson. First off, I think it has met deadline, as I understand this bill. If it would have to come back and be re-referred to the Commerce Committee, then it might have to make a brief stop in the rules, assuming that it got out of Commerce. I might add, if I may, and it's not expressly on the answer to the question, but the way that I read the bill, it would apply to CGIP and to PEEP. I'm just hoping perhaps that I'm misreading it, and the author will have an opportunity possibly to change the language of the bill, maybe move it back to the committee that it originally came from, so that it can be fixed before it gets back to the floor.
Representative Halverson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would Representative Tice yield to a question?
She will yield. Representative Halverson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Tice, per Representative Atkins' suggestion, is working on the language in prior to its next step in Ways and Means something that you are amenable to?
Representative Tice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Representative Halverson. Yes, I am.
Representative Halverson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With that understanding that we will work for greater clarity and ensure that if indeed we are going to impact the citizens of the state of Minnesota in any kind of broad way or any kind of misunderstood way, that we can continue to work on language clarity and make sure it makes all its committee stops. Mr. Speaker.
Representative Halverson.
Would Representative Hoppe yield to a question?
He will yield. Representative Halverson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Hoppe, if for some reason we don't get clarity on this bill, I would request that you give us an opportunity to continue the discussion in the Commerce Committee if indeed we are going to be impacting CGIP and PEEP.
Representative Hoppe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Representative Halverson. We're always willing to discuss things. Let's see what it looks like after you and Representative Tice work on it. I don't want to give you the definitive answer. We'll see what it looks like when you're done.
Representative Halverson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Hoppe, for your openness to continuing this conversation. As I said, I'm committed to making sure that we are doing right by the people of Minnesota and that our bills are going through the proper process and that the experts, the citizens are getting to weigh in on our bills. And with that, I will withdraw my motion at this time.
Representative Halverson withdraws her motion.
Marquart moved that the rules of the House be so far suspended that House File Number 2018 be recalled from the Committee on Transportation, Policy, and Finance, be given its second and third readings, and be placed upon its final passage.
The member from Clay, Representative Marquart, to introduce your motion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker and members. I'd first of all like to call for a roll call.
A roll call has been requested. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call.
Thank you very
Representative
much,
Marquart.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker and members. Members, we have a very serious safety issue impacting our communities that actually is getting more dire by the day. And we have heard from mayors, we have heard from law enforcement, we have heard from emergency responders, we've heard from residents, and that is the increased dangers of oil trains coming through our communities. And the extent of that was even made more to light last week when the Minnesota Department of Transportation looked at how many people live within a half a mile of the tracks, either way of the tracks. And the number is 326,000 people. 326,000 residents of this state in harm's way. That means they're within a half a mile of these tracks, these oil trains, going through the middle of their communities, by their homes, by their schools, by their businesses. And in looking at the transportation proposal the other day and the budget resolution the other day, I'm not seeing any fix to that solution. That's why I'm bringing forward this motion to suspend the rules on House File 2018. Members, we have a new era in railroad travel right now. Communities have a lot smaller margin of error than they have in the past. Because now it just takes one oil train derailment, one explosion, and you have a catastrophe for your community. That margin of error has gotten very, very small. And, you know, what is the condition? There are 5 to 7 oil trains coming from western North Dakota, the Bakkens, through Minnesota every single day. That is over 700 rail cars, 23 million gallons of crude coming through this state every single day. And is it a threat? It is. In fact, you can just look at the media the last 4 weeks, we've had 4 derailments of oil trains. None, luckily, in Minnesota. Fortunately, none in Minnesota. But back in 2013, there was a derailment with oil crude in Canada that killed 47 people and leveled 30 buildings. And it was brought really to my attention in a big way in December of 2013 when there was a oil train derailment and explosion with flames over 100 feet high in a community just 25 miles west of Fargo-Moorhead. And that was in Castleton. And it was just a couple miles out of that city. It could have been a huge disaster. And the Homeland Security and Emergency Management has done a survey, and only 65 of the 340 fire departments that are along this route in Minnesota, where these oil trains come through, and it's about 700 miles of track, but less than 20% of our fire departments have gone through the training on oil trains and pipeline safety. That is a huge concern. So what does House File 2018 do. And what it does, it updates, it modernizes the assessment and appraisal practices for railroads. And one of the major parts of that is extending the operating property to the rolling stock, which is done in about 80% of the states in this nation. And the funding that comes from that assessment, that new way of assessing, would bring in about $23 million a year through the statewide business tax. And those dollars would go to provide dollars for 75 at-grade railroad crossings in this state identified by the Minnesota Department of Transportation, and that was the bill that Representative Hornstein championed last year. It would provide better safety measures at those crossings. And members, we've got to do what we can do. We can't make the crude oil less volatile, even though starting in April, North Dakota is requiring all oil leaving the state to be a little less volatile. We can't force the railroad companies to make their cars safer, even though they're doing that, but yet they've been involved in some of the explosions. So we can do what we can as a state today, and that is to make sure we set a bar that there be zero accidents at our crossings. There cannot be a single accident at our crossings. And that can happen. In early January in northern North Dakota, a bus went and hit a train. It wasn't an oil crude train, thank goodness, but it still resulted in the loss of lives. But we've got to make sure that we make these grade separations safer. We could do that through crossings, through better signage, and so forth. Also, another part of the bill would provide funding, very valuable funding, for training for our emergency responders and our first responders, which is absolutely crucial. Now, I know some members will say, well, let's just build pipelines. And pipelines is part of the solution. But right now, today, out of western North Dakota, 1.2 million barrels of oil is being produced. About 350,000 of that each day is already being sent through pipelines. So you still got about 850,000 barrels a day being shipped out on rail. Even if you had the Sandpiper pipeline and the Keystone pipeline, that would only solve half of what's currently being transported. Members, that's assuming nothing increases out in North Dakota, which it is. So members, the railroad companies are causing these increased dangers in our communities. The railroad companies are profiting greatly from these increased dangers in our communities. They have a responsibility to make sure that our communities are safer from the danger in which they have created. So, members, I'm asking, can we wait? If, we don't meet for another 12 days, is, something, I'm not saying that. But this is something that needs to be done now. And it's a bill that's been introduced. We can start getting dollars and training dollars to our emergency providers. We can start on the upgrades, on the crossings. It's something that should be done now. So members, I ask for your support to help make our community safer and to agree to suspend the rules.
Representative Hoppe, for what purpose do you rise?
Mr. Speaker, privilege of the House.
State your privilege of the House.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Marquart, I apologize and thank you for letting me get up during the hearing on this bill, or the hearing on working with this bill. Members, we rise to a lot of points of personal privilege here. We also have what we call a privilege of the House. This is truly a privilege of the House. We are a family here at the House. Sometimes we bicker a little bit like families do. We have a lot of people, members, that make all of us look good. Today, I want to rise and recognize one of those members that's made us look good, all of us look good for a long time. We have one of our family members that's been here for 30 years, and he's retiring. And he is somebody that, one of the first people I met at the Capitol, Marshall, do you want to come out? I know he's in the retiring room. Marshall Brown. One of the first people I met when I came here, and every day Marshall would come back and kind of tell me what's really going on in the world, and just a great guy, always happy, always smiling, always did the work. Marshall, we didn't always say thank you, we didn't always notice. Well, today we're saying thank you. So Marshall, thank you very much for taking good care of us for the last 30 years. Members and Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. Marshall, you're truly one of the great guys I've ever met. Always happy, always upbeat. It has been my privilege to get to know you. Members, thank you very much. Marshall, have a great retirement. Good luck with your music career, and we will miss you around here. Thank you.
Representative Kelly, for what purpose do you rise?
Yes, in regards to Representative Marquart's suspension.
Go ahead.
Mr. Speaker and members, and Representative Marquart, I was standing to oppose the Marquart suspension of the rules motion, and I appreciate the conversation, though, Representative Marquart. All of us have been looking at this situation of rail safety in transportation policy and finance almost since we started here, and I also want to make note that Representative Hornstein certainly has, as you said, championed legislation before, and he's doing that now. This bill that you proposed, 2018, unfortunately, was dropped just last week. Hearing request was late last Thursday night. We didn't even have an opportunity to put this on the calendar. So I believe that following the process is exactly what we need to do, not only with transportation policy and finance. It would have to go to Ways and Means, to taxes. This bill just absolutely is not ready. But I certainly do want to applaud you for bringing this to our attention. Not that we needed it, but it's good to have the conversation. And what I can say is that we are working towards this whole issue of rail safety. In fact, Representative Hornstein and I have a meeting scheduled for April 9th with the railroads, with the governor's office. So we are taking this situation seriously. We will work through it, but I would ask the body to oppose this motion. Thank you.
Any further discussion on the Marquart motion? The member from Hennepin, Representative Carlson.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I would like to speak in support of this motion. And truly, members, this should be a bipartisan issue. These trains are going through all kinds of communities across the state of Minnesota, and those dangers don't recognize a Republican or a Democratic district. It's impacting on all of us. And we began last spring working with Representative Horenstein and with Representative Marquart and others when this was just beginning to emerge, if you will, as an issue. And we did some things, you may remember, in the supplemental appropriations bill dealing with rail safety. But if anything has escalated at a rapid rate, it's the need to continue to move on this issue, and even more rapidly than we would have thought of just a few months ago. Representative Marquart pointed out nationally the number of tragedies that have taken place in Canada and in various places in the United States, the most recent one being right on the border with Iowa on the Illinois side. So rail safety is probably one of the biggest public safety issues that we will have faced in this legislature in years, and perhaps for many years to come. But there's been a lot of work done on this, and we are ready to move forward as soon as we can get this legislation passed. That's why the need to suspend the rules here today. There have been community meetings up and down these lines. In my area, we've had literally hundreds of people that have turned out in terms of because of their concerns about public safety. And along those lines, you have sometimes trauma centers located. You've got nursing homes located. They impact on all kinds of public safety services all along these lines. And so members, with the break coming up, it would be great if we could get this passed here today and begin to send the message as to just how serious we are and we should be with rail line safety. So I think all of us would appreciate a good, strong bipartisan support for a motion to suspend the rules.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Freiberg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Marquart's bill would fund critical infrastructure improvements related to rail safety around Minnesota. To be honest, this was certainly an issue I cared about, but really only in the abstract until 2 months ago. 2 months ago, Representative Carlson and I learned of a proposal to send an additional 12 freight trains per day, many containing volatile Bakken oil, through the communities we represent. Many of these trains would be nearly 1 mile long. Now, there are 4 at-grade crossings in the city of Crystal and more in the city of Robbinsdale. In Crystal, a mile-long train would block all 4 intersections and obstruct the ability of emergency vehicles to get to the northern part of the city. In Robbinsdale, there are places where the train tracks are 50 feet from people's homes. In Golden Valley, the tracks go right by people's homes and through sensitive parkland. Residents are justifiably concerned. They hear of derailments and explosions, many involving newer and supposedly safer rail cars, and they are concerned. We held 2 town hall meetings in Crystal, and each was attended by approximately 200 residents from all of the cities in the northwest suburbs. This is an issue we need to address on multiple fronts. Now, Representative Marquart's bill is one critical front where we need to address this issue. It would fund critical improvements at rail crossings, and I urge members to vote to suspend the rules and take up this important bill.
Just a reminder to members that the motion before us is a motion to suspend the rules, and that's what's really up for debate. The bill itself would be debated once the rule suspension happened. So to the motion to suspend the rules, the member from Washington, Representative Schoen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Well, then, to that motion, what I'd like to point out is how important this is. And I hear so many members in the body talk about one rail line that comes through their district. Maybe they have BN, maybe they have CP, the folks that carry most of the stuff. But Representative McNamara and I have both of them. So the trains that you complain about, we have them all. And it's a big deal. I have an uncontrolled intersection or uncontrolled rail crossing in my district that is on that project list that is in an industrial area that heavy freight traffic crosses every day, and it would be a nightmare. It's also right by a refinery. And if we lost a refinery in Minnesota, we know what happens to prices if we lost anything. It's a disaster. And that's what this is really about, Representative Marquart, is we're trying to avert a disaster. And I thank you for bringing this forward. This is I don't know too many other things that are as equal to this, and in Representative Carlson's community, and Representative Freiberg's community, and in Minneapolis and all the others, but there's about a 4-mile stretch of my district that has about 8,000 people that would be affected if a derailment happened and there was a fire. And so just because of the urgency that's involved with this, please vote to suspend the rules. Let's get this taken care of. The rail companies are making record profits, and our community shouldn't be on the hook to deal with the issues at hand. Thank you.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Dean, to the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I rise to support the motion to suspend the rules. And I think it's important that we do that now. If we wait, we're only asking for trouble. And if I could just back up and speak to Representative Marquart's comments. He said currently 326,000 Minnesotans are within a half mile of tracks where hazardous material is running through. And should the proposed project and connector that Representative Carlson and Representative Freiberg have spoken about, should that take place, and they're currently moving along, we would have an additional 55,000 residents within the half mile of a new route that would reroute trains. And that's only residents. This would actually take a train that would go right underneath Target Field through most of downtown Minneapolis and would expose over 100,000 employees that work in downtown Minneapolis. So I think it's critical that we take this up right now. In addition to the Minneapolis portion, it would also impact a Trauma One center in Robbinsdale, a hospital, that in the event of an accident, that hospital would have to be evacuated. So we need this to happen now. We actually needed it to happen yesterday, and I would ask that members support suspending the rules so we can take this up today.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Loeffler.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I too rise in support of this. Like Representative Schoen, I have 2 large railroad yards in my district and more tracks crisscrossing it than probably almost any legislative district in a residential neighborhoods. We have 40 railroad bridges alone, most of which are about 100 years old in my Senate district. And they are all looking like they are 100 years old. One of them had a piece of concrete fall down and break someone's windshield who was driving. Thankfully, no one was hurt. We've had our main street closed for almost 2 years to replace one of those that was unsteady and unsafe. And the evacuation of my dense legislative district would be almost impossible given the high density that we have if we were to have a sudden major accident with these kinds of vehicles coming through our area. We need to step up, make sure our first responders are ready, and that our communities are safe. Thank you.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Hortman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Representative Uglum and Representative Newton and I represent the city of Coon Rapids. In the city of Coon Rapids, we have 21,000 people within a half a mile of the Burlington Northern Railroad tracks. And the Marquart bill is an urgent matter. I think we should suspend the rules and take it up immediately. We have a street that bisects the city of Coon Rapids, and our public safety personnel can't get north and south when the trains are parked on the tracks. What the Marquart bill would do is help us build an overpass to help our public safety vehicles get through. So members, with 21,000 people in my community living next to the railroad tracks, I'd ask you to vote in favor of the motion to suspend the rules.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Hornstein.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members, and I think this is a very important discussion that we're having here on the House floor. I want to thank Representative Kelly, Chair Kelly, for hearing my bill on assessments and a bill that Representative Anderson championed related to this problem that Representative Carlson and Representative Freiberg were talking about. But we had several other bills that weren't heard, and I think that this Marquart legislation is so important for the reasons that have been enumerated. But one of the ones that I think is especially critical is it addresses, I think, some fundamental unfairness in terms of how railroads are treated vis-a-vis other utilities and transportation interests. What Representative Marquart is doing in House File 2018 is, in effect, closing a loophole. You know, property taxes are paid by pipeline companies, by airlines, utility companies, but the railroads have carved out an exemption for themselves, as they have on so many other laws, such as the Community Right to Know Bill, the Community Safety and Right to Know Bill, which other entities that are involved in toxic waste and toxic pollution, hazardous materials, have to report very openly and transparently to first responders and communities. Railroads are exempted from that. So this bill is critically important, and I would urge a yes vote. And I do appreciate, having said that Representative Kelly is involved in this. But this was a bill that was not heard. And so for the reasons that Representative Marquart and others have enumerated, let's support this motion today.
The member from Clay, Representative Lean.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. And hearing debate, hearing discussion, I think we can all agree that this is a very crucial issue for our state. We all have pieces of rail infrastructure in many of our districts, and we know how important the safety issues of this are. But I want to speak for a minute directly to the motion here today. And we need to do this. We need to suspend the rules and pass this bill off the floor today. And I say that because I think about just last week as I was leaving my place. I drive, and Moorhead is separated between the north and south part of the city. I drive into the south part of the city, and I see the grade crossing arms come down. What's more important, what's I should say most important, is that what I also saw was a fire truck with its red lights blaring, hitting that intersection, having to do a U-turn, and having to find a new throughway to get to the southern part of the city. Members, this is a crucial bill that we have to pass. This speaks to our everyday needs in our communities, not just about the specific rail infrastructure and rail safety pieces, but about livelihoods of our constituents. Members, if somebody were to have a heart attack or their home was burning down, getting this bill done today is going to provide our districts with the needs they need to provide the infrastructure so that public safety can get through our communities on a day-to-day basis. Members, vote green on the Marquart motion. Thank you.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Thiessen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I also rise in support of the Marquart motion, and it's really, for this reason, the railroads do have these special perks, as Representative Hornstein pointed out. But as I understand from listening to Representative Kelly's remarks about this issue, he is not interested in doing anything to actually ask the railroads to participate in this solution, which means that the only way we're going to find the money to be able to do it is using the general fund. And as I look at the targets that the majority has put forward now and adopted in Ways and Means, there's no money in the transportation bill, certainly, to fund the work that I think everybody here has spoken so eloquently about. There's no money for that. And if I look to other funds that you could go to, education, we are providing $1 of education funding for every $15 of tax cuts in the Republican targets. So there's not going to be money in the education. We can't dig further into the education budget. If you look at the Health and Human Services target, $1.3 billion of cuts that committee is going to have to find if you're going to honor your commitments to long-term care. We're not going to be able to go there to find some additional money. The jobs target, investment in broadband and greater Minnesota economic development, there's a cut there, a $100 million cut from where we were in the last biennium. We're not going to be able to go to that budget to find some more resources to do this. So if we take Representative Kelly at his word that he does not want to attack the perks that the railroads already have, and we're going to have to look to general fund to pay for these important improvements that Representative Marquart is bringing forth here, the fact of the matter is there is no budget, there is no money in the Republican targets, particularly because, again, we're doing $15 of tax cuts for every $1 of education spending. There is no money in that budget to do it. So it is urgent we do it, not just because of all the reasons that were pointed out by other members here today, but because the targets that have been adopted make any reference that Representative Kelly wants to make, the words are really meaningless because he has no money to do it. So it's great that he's saying he wants to help, but you've given him nothing to provide that help. And so I hope that we adopt the Marquart motion, we move and pass this bill, because I think as a body we can stand up and say this is the right thing to do. The targets that were adopted by the Republican leadership and majority are wrong, and together we can come around and say let's do this for the people of Minnesota. Let's make this a safer state.
The member from Goodhue, Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members. And again, I appreciate Representative Marquart, as I said before, elevating to this conversation of rail safety. But now, since we've had a number of members talk about their concern, I think maybe we should just address this process again and talk about the bill itself, because there are many, many problems with the bill. First of all, it doesn't have a Senate companion. It was dropped last week. We couldn't even have heard it this week.
Mr. Speaker, point of parliamentary inquiry.
Representative Thiessen, state your point of parliamentary inquiry.
Did the bill that Representative Garofalo brought forth was it earlier this week on the tip penalty, did that have a Senate companion? Did it when the bill was brought forward? I will clarify. When the bill was brought and debated on the House floor, did it have a
Mr.
Senate
Speaker?
companion?
We're under a point of parliamentary inquiry brought by Representative Thiessen, and the staff is checking right now to see if there is a Senate companion for that House file. Representative Thiessen, there is a Senate companion to that bill. Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. As I was saying, just a number of issues with the bill itself. First of all, Representative Marquardt's bill triples the railroad property tax, which is actually against federal law, the Railroad Recovery Regulatory Reform Act. So right there, if we pass this bill, we would end up in a lawsuit that the railroads would take on for years. We talk about the concern of the derailments, and out of all the
Representative
derailments
Dean,
that
for
have
what
happened,
purpose do you rise?
Point of inquiry?
State your point of parliamentary inquiry.
Are we under order of suspension of rules right now?
We are on the Marquart motion to suspend the rules. That's correct.
Thank you.
Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. As I was saying, the issue of the lawsuit would take us into money that if you really want to spend on railroad safety, we would spend it in courts instead. Of all the derailments that have happened over the years, it is a major concern, but we don't even know what the problem is. They did not happen at rail grade crossing areas. So all the money that Representative Marquart wants to put into this, we don't even understand the problem yet. By the way, the railroads will be putting in $300 million of improvements into this state this year alone. Before we vilify them, maybe we should appreciate the fact that Representative Hornstein, for example, invites the railroads in to come and have a conversation about railroad safety. It is in their best interest to be partners in this state and to have safe commerce within the entire state. So once again, I will suggest to the body that we will be following the correct process. We will be sitting down with everyone concerned, and we take this problem very serious. With that, I would renew my request that you oppose the suspension of the rules.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Pepin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Would Representative Lean yield to a question?
He will yield. Representative Pepin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, or Mr. Speaker. Representative Lean, I'm wondering if you've had conversations with your senator and if he is authoring this bill. I understand that's of great importance. Is he the author of the bill in the Senate?
Representative Lean.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and Majority Leader Pepin. I have not had conversations with my senator about this bill. However, I have had many conversations with my senator, including my mayor, constituents in my district, on how important this issue is and how important and how badly needed we need to get something done on this issue.
Representative Pepin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Lean, I would encourage you to talk to your senator on this. If it's an important issue, you might want to have him consider authoring it in the Senate. Representative Marquart, I know you brought this forward. Would Representative Marquart yield to a question?
He will yield. Representative Pepin.
Representative Marquart, is your senator or any senator authoring this bill? Have you talked to your senator about authoring this? And since this is I agree, it's an urgency. Have you talked to your senator?
Representative Marquart.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker and Majority Leader. He is supportive. I don't know if he's introduced the bill yet, but I know he's supportive. Thank you.
Representative Pepin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Marquart, well, you brought an urgency to the House, and I'm wondering, since this is such a great urgency, I'm surprised that you haven't talked to your senator, apparently any senators. I'm wondering if Representative Marquart would yield to another question.
He will yield. Representative Pepin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and Representative Marquart. I'm wondering if you had an opportunity to talk to Senator Bach, and if he's informed you if he will be taking this urgency up today as well, or tomorrow.
Representative Marquart.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker and members. First of all, Senator Eakin is very much in support. We've been at events, and he is very much in support of this. You may not think this is an urgency, as you just said. I think this is an urgency. Because you have, right now, today, we probably will meet 12 days from today again. 12 days. And in those 12 days, 80 more oil trains will come right in the middle of our communities, past schools and homes and businesses. There will be, with those 80 trains, 8,800 different oil tankers carrying over 250 million gallons of crude oil right through our communities. And that's why every single day we wait and we don't get something going adds peril to our residents. Our residents want to know that help is on the way. And that's why I think this is an urgency. And I think, why I've heard so many times on the House floor, well, we can't do this because of the Senate, or I don't have control because of the Senate. Forget the Senate. This is something we can control right now. Here and now we can control and do something, move it forward, put the pressure on the Senate and move forward. But members, we can only do what we can control, and that's what we do here in the House. And if we wait another 12 more days, we have 80 more oil trains coming through these communities. And we know, members in the rural communities, that half-mile zone either way of the tracks, that's pretty much your whole town. I know in Dilworth, where I live, that's about 90% of the city is within a half a mile either way. This could be a disaster with a small margin of error. So I know my senator is in support, but let's do what we can do today.
Representative Pepin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think if Representative Marquart continued to yield, I think he didn't hear my question, if you'd continue to yield. Thank you.
He will yield. Representative Pepin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Marquart, I'm wondering if you could let us know when Senate Majority Leader Bach intends to give this bill a hearing. Will it be today or tomorrow, or will it be after the 12-day break? Are they planning on bringing something forward to meet before then, or if you could just let us know what the intention and if you could inform us of your conversation with Senator Bach.
Representative Marquart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and Majority Leader Pepin. I have not talked to Senate Majority Member Bach, but again, let's control what we can hear today on the House floor.
Representative Pepin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would Representative Lean yield again?
He will yield. Representative Pepin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm wondering, Representative Lean, if you could inform me of, in the body of your conversation with Senate Majority Leader Bach, and when he may be bringing this to the Senate floor.
Representative Lean.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and Majority Leader Pepin. I have not spoken with Majority Leader Bach on this bill, but again, this is the issue I hear about the most out of any issue now that we've gotten flood control largely shored up. This is the issue I hear about the most of any other issue from constituents in my district. And to delay this bill, to delay action on this bill for another day, I think is a real injustice to not only my constituents, but the constituents we've heard from many members on this floor here.
Representative Pepin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would Representative Lean continue to yield to a question?
He will yield. Representative Pepin.
Mr. Speaker, Representative Lean, what is the effective date of this urgent bill? If we were to pass it today and take it up, what is the effective date?
Representative Lean.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Majority Leader Pepin. I do see the effective date is 2016. However, delaying action on this bill for another day will, again, as I say, show our constituents that we're not willing to give this important issue the appropriate attention it deserves.
Representative Pepin.
Parliamentary inquiry, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Winkler, state your point of parliamentary inquiry.
Mr. Speaker, if we suspend the rules to take this bill up immediately and pass it, would an amendment to change the effective date be in order?
It would, Representative Winkler. Representative Pepin.
Mr. Speaker and members, so far we've heard that this is an urgency, and I understand that this is a concern. We've heard that neither Representative Lean or Representative Marquart, or I imagine I can ask any number of members if they've talked to their senators to find out whether they're moving this forward. We found out that apparently there is no companion to this bill in the Senate, nor has anybody talked to Senate Majority Leader Bach to find out if they would be taking this bill up. My understanding is that they are on break now and they cannot take it up till 12 days after 12 days from today when they come back from break, or maybe it's 13. We find out the effective date apparently is 2016, and it took a little while to come to that answer, so apparently nobody happened to know when the effective date is. And Representative Marquart, you made a good point. You said, forget what the Senate is doing. And you know what? You should have done that last year when you passed the luxury office building on behalf of Senator Bach. Because you know what? That wasn't a very good move, because when Representative Thiessen talked about our budget and what our budget is doing and what it is not doing, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about what our budget is not doing, what we won't be doing. We will not be passing luxury office buildings for politicians. We will not be raising taxes by $2.1 billion, including farm equipment repair tax that hurts rural areas like yours, Representative Marquart. I'm glad that you rolled that back, but that hurts rural
Representative
areas.
Yaruso, for what purpose do you rise?
Point of parliamentary inquiry.
State your point of parliamentary inquiry.
To what point are we addressing right now?
The motion before the body is a Marquart motion to suspend the rules to take up House File 2018. Representative Pepin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I was just responding to the comments that Representative Thiessen made, so I think it's fair that I make comments on it. So we will not be doing that. We will also not be increasing the gas tax by 16 cents a gallon in our proposal, because Minnesotans are not up for another tax increase. The $2.1 billion tax increase of 2013 was enough.
State your point of order, Representative Liebling.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to a point of order under Mason's Section 101. Debate is limited to the question before the House. I thought that we were on a motion to suspend the rules to take up a Marquart, to take up a bill that has to do with oil trains endangering communities. And now I'm hearing a debate that has to do with all kinds of other things. So, Mr. Speaker, I would ask that you would find my point of order well taken.
Mr. Speaker, advice?
State your advice, Representative Pepin.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Representative Liebling and members, perhaps you weren't listening earlier. Representative Thiessen went wildly off the topic of suspending the rules when he talked about our budget proposal and our budget targets yesterday. I think it is within our purview to talk about this issue when it was brought up by the minority leader. So I would ask you to find the Liebling point of order not well taken.
Representative Liebling.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Advice.
State your advice.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not aware of any rule in Mason's, maybe other member can enlighten me, that says I can ignore a rule because somebody else did it. Maybe that's custom and usage, I don't know, but I think if we get into that and we just say somebody's behavior justifies mine, we might as well throw out all the rules right now. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, members. I am going to defer ruling on this point of order and just remind members to keep the debate to the motion before the body, which is a Marquart motion to suspend the rules to immediately take up House File 2018. Representative Pepin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was just going to wrap up here, and I was just going to point out that some of the things that we would not be doing. You saw our budget targets. We're going to be working through the process. We'll also not be giving large salary increases to the commissioners. And with that, I know we are a little bit off the topic. This was, though, getting back to the point, this was to declare an urgency. And as I've said, we don't have a Senate author. We don't have any commitment from the Senate that they're going to take it up. The effective date is 2016. So, members, I would urge a no vote.
The member from Washington, Representative Schoen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would Representative Kelly yield to question?
He will yield. Representative Schoen.
Representative Kelly, one of the reasonings that I heard you bring up for not wanting to do this is that basically, fundamentally, it appears that there's issues that might make it unconstitutional. Is that correct?
Representative Kelly.
Mr. Speaker, members, Representative Schoen, what I said was that I don't appreciate the fact that we'd be violating the Railroad Recovery Regulatory Reform Act, and that I believe that we would end up in a lawsuit as soon as we tried to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Schoen.
Would Representative Kelly continue to yield?
He will yield. Representative Schoen.
Representative Kelly, if I heard you correctly, so the reasoning you're offering is it's against law, against court ruling, and that would be a very good reason not to bring this legislation forward?
Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Schoen, I believe what I said is that if this in fact violates the Railroad Recovery Regulatory Reform Act, I think it would be ill-advised to do so because we would end up in court.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Schoen.
Would Representative Pepin yield to a question?
She will yield. Representative Schoen.
Representative Pepin, are we going to be taking up any bills on the House floor that are not going to be taken up on the Senate floor this session?
Representative Pepin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and Representative Schoen. It's a possibility, but when we're moving to suspend the rules to declare an urgency on the House floor when the Senate has already adjourned for the week and will not be coming back in 12 days, and no one has spoken to the senators, and their own senators, or the Senate Majority Leader about the bill, I don't think it would be prudent for us to suspend the rules and in fact take this up when we have work to do. We have committee deadlines and a process. So I hope that answers your question thoroughly.
Representative Schoen.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and well, I look forward to the upcoming session and the finish of the year here. But we've heard some bills already in committee that have some constitutional and legal implications that clearly are going to be ruled unconstitutional even if they did get to passage. We've heard bills already that have doesn't sound like they're even going to make to the Senate floor. And I understand your position here. This is very important. Please don't say that not all of us have talked to our senators. I have talked to my senator about this because this is very important to us. And thank you very much.
The member from Washington, Representative Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also want to add that I have spoken with my senator, and they are taking it very seriously and moving forward.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Lincheski.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I just want to correct something that was said about the effective date. So I'm sure that some folks are going to vote with Representative Marquart and some aren't going to, but as you decide what you want to do, just know that the effective date conversation you just heard was actually not an accurate portrayal. So what the bill does is to make this happen, what Representative Marquart is doing, which is an excellent idea, and we should get this done immediately. To achieve what Representative Marquart is doing in the bill, you have to change the way the property tax system values railroad property for tax purposes. So what the date is changing is the effective date for assessing the property. So when Majority Leader Pepin said, and asked Representative Lean about the effective date, I'd urge you to go read the bill. I'm just doing that now. And the effective date clearly says that the date that's being changed to 2016 is for purposes of assessing the value of the property. And in Minnesota, for all the folks like Representative Drazkowski who serve on the Property Tax Committee, people know that we are into the 2015 assessment practices for property across the state right now. When you change the law on how you're going to value a property, you have to start at the beginning of the next year. So the bill actually provides for the earliest possible date that this could take place, and I didn't want people to think that there was some sort of mockery going on, that if this was serious it wouldn't happen until 2016. It's actually the fastest you can do it in the property valuation system, and I'm sure Representative Drazkowski and Representative Davids can explain it to you further if you're not that interested in how we do things in taxes. Thank you.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Dabney.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I rise both to clarify some of the debate here and to urge members vote green on the Marquart motion to declare an urgency. Representative Lincheski is absolutely right about the process for the assessment of these railroad properties. If you're concerned about property taxes, this bill is a property tax decrease for Minnesotans. Misrepresented in some of this debate, but our local units of government are the last stop. Many of you have held local office on both sides of this aisle, and you know that at the end of the day, the safety of our communities is paramount to local elected officials. And either we increase property taxes on every homeowner, every business, and every farmer in Minnesota to provide the at-grade upgrades for safety in this state, for these trains that are bringing dangerous materials through our state, or we have the railroads be responsible for the safety of the rolling stock and the communities that they roll through. Lower property taxes can start today for all of your constituents if you vote green on the Marquart motion and we move forward on this important policy upgrade. Thank you.
The member from St. Louis, Representative Metza.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, you know, this is about safety. It's about job safety. These trains are hauling oil into our state, and they're not hauling our tachonites to the port. We have had issues with rail transportation since the Balkan boom, and while ore prices have fallen from roughly $120 a ton down to below $60, steel workers are getting layoff notices while we're debating semantics on the House floor. Vote Marquart, vote lean.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Thiessen.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And this really is kind of a sad debate for the House, I have to say. It's really time to step up and show some leadership here, members. We don't need to ask the Senate for permission to act on an urgency. What I hear is a bunch of excuses being made on the other side of the aisle because you are kowtowing to these big corporate railroad interests. We heard Representative Kelly say exactly that. We heard him say, we're not going to go forward with this because we're afraid of a lawsuit. When in fact, 80% of states, as Representative Marquart already said, do this kind of tax. If it's unconstitutional, how can 80% of the states do it? It's an excuse. You're making excuse after excuse after excuse to hide your real motives because you don't want the people of Minnesota to know what those real motives are. Here's the deal. You can go home and your constituents can ask you, did you do anything to protect our communities from these oil trains? And you can vote yes today and say, yes, I have, and we're moving ahead on that. Or you can vote no today and say, no, I didn't because the railroads told me I couldn't do it. That's what this is about. Please vote yes, members.
The member from Clay, Representative Marquart.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker and members. Members, this is a serious issue. And 5 to 7 oil trains are going through our communities, most of them coming in through Moorhead and going right through Dilworth, where I live. See them every single day. And in a lot of these communities, 100% of the communities within that danger zone. If something, God forbid, was to happen. Representative Kelly, I appreciate your comments, but we're not doing anything different for railroads than the way we currently in Minnesota treat airlines, pipelines, utilities. And if the railroad's first response, when we ask and say, you know what, you're making huge profits, you've created an extra danger in these communities, we'd like you to pay your fair share to help make them more safe. If their first response is, we're going to sue you, what does that really say? And how can you support that? So we're asking a danger created by our railroads that, by the way, none of these communities asked for. None of them asked for these extra oil trains that come through by their homes and by their schools. But yet the railroads are not only causing the danger, they're profiting greatly from the danger. Members, I ask you to declare an urgency today. I am not confident from what I've seen either in the transportation proposal the other day or in the budget resolutions. I've seen no indication of support of moving forward on this. Let's do this today. Let's send a message throughout the state that we're going to be there to provide some help on this. And it really comes down to a basic question. Are you going to side with our homeowners who have the extra danger, the extra burdens of these dangerous oil trains coming through our communities? Or are we going to side with the railroad special interest? To me, that's a no-brainer. Members, please vote yes to suspend the rules.
The clerk will take the roll on the motion. The clerk will close the roll. There being 58 ayes and 71 nays, the motion does not prevail and the rules are not suspended. Announcements. The member from Hennepin, Representative Khan, for what purpose do you rise?
I rise to announce a very interesting event this weekend. On Saturday night, there's an event called Civil War Homecoming at the Fitzgerald Theater in St. Paul, Saturday at 7 o'clock. And looking up at the portrait of Abraham Lincoln, I have to announce that one of our esteemed members, my colleague, Representative Erdahl, will be the voice of Abraham Lincoln at that event. It's an event of songs and music, and so I suggest.
Representative Moran, for what purpose do you rise?
Mr. Speaker, point of personal privilege, please.
State your point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Before us, we have a House resolution recognizing the well-being of all children in the state of Minnesota and across this country. Today, I would like to read, a body here would like to read the resolution out loud. But before I do that, there is a coalition of really community advocates and parents and others who are really working towards the well-being of children, trying to prevent abuse and neglect. And would have been known that we were going to debate for an hour or so on this issue, and they all left. But I would like to recognize Kate, who's up there in the gallery, who has stood still and who's here to really advocate and support for the work that we do here in this body, but also to recognize this resolution. So to Kate. So, Mr. Speaker, I would like to start off by reading the resolution and then yield to other members of the House. So, a House resolution recognizing the well-being of all Minnesota children. Whereas research over the last 2 decades in the evolving field of neuroscience, molecular biology, public health, genomics, and epigenetics reveals that experiences in the first few years of life build changes into the biology of the human body that, in turn, influence the person's physical and mental health over the person's lifetime. And whereas these early experiences literally shape the physical agriculture of a child's developing brain and establish either a sturdy or a fragile foundation for all the learning, health, and behavior that follows. And I would like to yield to Representative Creasha.
Representative Creasha.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Whereas strong, frequent, or prolonged stress in childhood caused by adverse childhood experiences can become toxic stress, impacting the development of a child's fundamental brain architecture and stress response systems. And whereas the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study, ACEs, data corroborates the neurobiology of childhood development, showing specific correlations between 10 categories of abuse, neglect, and household dysfunction, and consistent increased risk of disease and negative health behaviors in adulthood. And I'll yield to Representative Khan.
Representative Khan.
Whereas the Minnesota Behavioral Risk Factor Surveillance System, BRFSS, conducted by the Minnesota Department of Health in 2011, found that 60% of Minnesotans surveyed had 2 or more ACEs, and 15% had 5 or more ACEs before the age of 18. And whereas the 213 Minnesota student survey data indicate that 35% of Minnesota students grades 7 through 12 reported at least one adverse childhood experience. And I would now like to yield to Representative Winkler.
Representative Winkler.
whereas BRFSS data also show that in Minnesota, American Indian and African American adults had a significantly higher percent of individuals reporting 5 or more ACEs as compared to white adults, and whereas the Minnesota Department of Human Services 2013 Child Welfare Report states that American Indian, African American, and children of 2 or more races are respectively 15.5, 4.0, and 4.0 times more likely than white children to be placed out of home. And I would like to yield to Representative Miller.
Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Whereas early childhood offers a unique window of opportunity to prevent and heal the impacts of adverse childhood experiences and toxic stress on a child's brain and body, and whereas positively influencing the architecture of a child's developing brain is more effective and less costly than attempting to correct poor learning, health, and behaviors later in life, and I would like to yield to Representative Ward.
Representative Ward. Representative Lane.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Whereas a child's brain continues to develop through adolescent and into young adulthood, and whereas the emerging science and research on toxic stress and adverse child experiences demonstrate a growing public health crisis for the state with implications for the state's educational, juvenile justice, criminal justice, and public health systems, and I would like to yield to Representative Ward.
Representative Ward.
Whereas a critical factor in buffering children from the effects of toxic stress and adverse childhood experiences is the existence of supportive, stable relationships between children and their families, caregivers, and other important adults in their lives. And whereas evidence shows that parent knowledge and understanding of childhood development can encourage positive parenting skills, support healthy cognitive and social development in children, and prevent and reduce incidences of abuse and neglect. Now, therefore, and I'd like to yield to Representative Moran.
Representative Moran.
Be it resolved by the Committee on Rules and Legislative Administration of the House of Representatives of the State of Minnesota that the principles of brain development, the connections between mental and physical health, the concept of toxic stress, adverse childhood experiences, buffering relationships, and the roles of early intervention and investment in children are important strategies for the well-being of all Minnesota children. Mr. Speaker, I would like as a body, as we break for the Easter holiday, that I would like for us to take this information with us so that we become more of an informed body of people here who are making decisions that are impacting children, families, and community, that we take this information and that we learn from this information, that we make decisions based on the information that are put before us around neuroscience and the ACEs. And our hope, and the hope of many of the advocates who are working strongly to prevent abuse and neglect of children, is that we can become better decision makers as we are creating laws and policies that are impacting children's families and communities. So I just want to thank this body for listening. Happy Easter, and be well. Thank you.
Announcements. The member from Mille Lacs, Representative Erickson.
Point of personal privilege, Mr. Speaker.
State your point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Visiting us today and sitting through our long session here have been students from Faith Christian School in Forreston. I'd like them to stand along with their teacher, Nathan Johnson. Thank you for coming, students, and I think you really got a full feel of what a legislative session can be like. Thank you.
Any further announcements? The member from Hennepin, Representative Joachim.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I didn't get a chance to do this earlier this week, but I want to congratulate the Hopkins Girls Royals basketball team for their state championship win in 4A that happened last Saturday.
Any further announcements? Representative Pepin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I move that when the House adjourns today, it adjourns until 12 noon on Tuesday, April 7th, 2015.
Representative Pepin moves that when the House adjourns today, it adjourns until 12 o'clock noon, Tuesday, April 7th, 2015. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The motion prevails. Representative Pepin.
I move that the House do now adjourn.
Representative Pepin moves that the House do now adjourn. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The motion prevails, and the House stands adjourned until 12 o'clock noon, Tuesday, April 7th, 2015. Enjoy your break, members.